Hello everyone and welcome to my review of the first in Weasels over Syria campaign for DCS World and the F-16. And just not to bury the lead at all, you should get this campaign. If you already own the F-16 module, definitely no-brainer, pick it up. If you don't already own the F-16 module, this is the first campaign that would really tempt me to, say, pick up the module to play this campaign. That's how much I enjoyed this. But anyway, let's take a step back and go through some of the details. So this campaign is set in a slight alt history version of the Syrian war, following Ground Pounder's other campaigns that have gone slightly off the rails since 9/11, but not too different. Notably in Syria here, the big change is that there is much more US and Russian activity, including troops on the ground assisting either side. And this has culminated in a no-fly zone being declared by a NATO-aligned coalition to keep the Syrian government forces from bombing the Syrian rebels. And this is where the player comes in. There is no real way to enforce a no-fly zone if you can't enter the no-fly zone yourself, and they can't enter the no-fly zone because of the amount of Syrian SAMs in the area. So your little six-wing has been brought in specifically to act as Weasels, going in and taking out enemy air defense sites to allow other forces to prosecute their targets. Really cool setup. I really like seed operations, find it a huge amount of fun, and so having a whole campaign based purely around seed is absolutely right up my alley. And the campaign has done a fantastic job. This is very much one of the best, if not the best campaign I have ever played in DCS World. All 12 of the missions offer something a little bit different. A couple of them are a bit similar in the beginning, but there are definitely differences between every single mission you fly. You're never doing the same thing twice, despite it always being SEAD operations. And there are no do-nothing missions, which long-time viewers of my channel know I absolutely hate in campaigns. When you've got a mission that just doesn't do anything and is just there for filler, there are none whatsoever in this campaign. Even the first mission, which is ostensibly a training mission, is a really interesting, fun and challenging training mission with its own little surprises along the way. Every mission brings its own challenges to the table, whether that is a limited weapon set, whether that is high cloud cover, or whether that is going into a particularly sticky situation, or maybe a situation where you don't know where the SAMs are and they might pop up underneath you at any moment in time. Really good, really fun, really intense. I have to say the two standout features of this campaign for me are the two entirely new systems that the campaign dev has brought to DCS that I think would go fantastically in some other systems. Most notably is the AI behaviour of the air defence systems. Since there is so much of a focus on air defence in this, it really makes sense that you need them to be on their best behaviour to make a fun and interesting experience, and they have done a really good job at this. Air defense systems will naturally stay offline to try and lure you in closer. They will come online and immediately lock you once you're in the missile engagement range. Missile crews will turn off if they see you launch a harm at them. And so what you've got is a really interesting game of cat and mouse. It's not as simple as simply fly into the area, fire off a harm and go back home. It is a lot of the time a case of getting close enough, getting good visual ID on target, maybe dodging 1 or 3 missiles that are sent your way, and then prosecuting the attack, hitting them with something like a Maverick that you can get nice and close with. The other system that worked really well with this is the ground control. Very often campaigns simply use the DCS ground control if they use anything, and I think we can all admit DCS ground control is not great. DCS ATC really needs some work, and this shows what the ATC really could be. Really feel like you're actually interacting with the system, you're flying proper approach pathways, going into holding patterns, landing when you're told to, switching frequencies at the right moment. All really fun, really interesting, and make that less interesting part, the landing and the takeoff after you've done all of the action, actually still really fun, really interesting to do. And kind of tying in with that is the voice acting. The voice acting on this campaign is absolutely stellar. I cannot think of a single line that was bad in any way. They were all incredibly well done, both in terms of the writing and in terms of the actual voice acting delivery. It all really helped to pull you into the mission. That said, if listening to voice acting isn't your thing, then it's really absolutely fine. Most of the long conversations are optional, so if you're just not in the mood, you can ignore them. And even though the flight's times on occasion can be a little bit long, they're never really all that long. And for the most part, if you're not interested in listening to the background talking in those sections, you can just happily fast forward, especially on your second attempt when you know when things are going to start to go down. And then there are loads of just nice little touches on top of that. The really nice opening and closing splash screen at the end of each mission. The fact that it's capped off with a really nicely done epilogue just to wrap you up. The accompanying documents that come with the file, really cool, really interesting. Got a lot of notes there on all the different air defense systems you come up with. And that's really, really interesting to know. Going into this, I really didn't know my SA8 from my SA10. Now I absolutely do. I'd also say it's really good for a whole variety of different skill levels. The missions are set up so that you don't need to get all of the targets to complete them. You just need to really take off, and that is about it. That will get you onto the next mission if you really do get stuck. But you get more points the more objectives you complete. It is really quite challenging to 100% a lot of the missions, and so there's always something that you can come back for if you are really wanting to perfectly do every one. At the same time, if you're struggling or you're newer to the module like I was at the beginning, it's absolutely fine to miss some optional objectives. You won't take out 100% of the enemy, but that's still absolutely fine. And kind of along with that, we also have things like air-to-air refueling is entirely optional in the campaign. You absolutely can. If you're happy and confident with air-to-air refueling, then very often there is air-to-air refueling available so that you could always burn more fuel while you're in the combat area and then top yourself up. But if you don't like air-to-air refueling, you find it really challenging, you can go the entire campaign without doing so. There's only one mission where air-to-air refueling is needed, and that mission actually stops and lets you quit when the air-to-air refueling comes on, and then loads you in a second part after the air-to-air refueling is done, giving you options for how much difficulty you like, which I really appreciate. And definitely something that I did notice was how robust the system is, considering how many moving parts there are in some of these missions, with multiple allied flights, hostile flights, numerous ground targets on both sides. It could very easily all go haywire, but I never had a mission soft lock or mess up in any way. Certainly some missions, the scripting clearly did go a little bit iffy, but nicely they've built in catches for every single one of those, so occasionally my wingman wouldn't let off a bomb that he was supposed to be dropping, but the scripting would catch that, realise what's going on, and a couple of minutes after he was supposed to drop it, everything still proceeds as if he did drop it, which I really, really appreciate. It's incredibly hard to get the right mix of having things actually simulated and relying on scripting. Both can go wrong. I think Ground Pounder Sims here has picked the exact right path, and this is absolutely brilliant. And honestly, when I'm thinking about this campaign, I really struggle to think of any criticism that I can level against it. My one thing to warn you is if you do want a air-to-air campaign, this is not an air-to-air campaign. There is one mission that involves air-to-air combat. It is a very brief episode of air-to-air combat, but it's there. But if you're wanting a more gritty air-to-air experience, this isn't that. This is really based around air-to-ground, really focusing on Seed in particular. I guess the one mission that didn't quite hit it with me was the one mission with air-to-air combat, notably because it had a very, very challenging ground section that was also quite lengthy in its build-up, and then after that you get an air-to-air section, which is hitting the player completely new for the module. They don't have any other experience in it before in the campaign, and it's actually a really challenging air-to-air combat. At least it was incredibly challenging for me, meaning that I had to repeat it a lot, meaning I had to repeat the really hard ground attack bit, which I got really good at, but it's still a bit of a pain. I would have preferred it if those two sections had been broken up. Maybe if you fly and you get the air-to-air combat as being intercepted, the mission gets scrubbed, you go back, and then on a subsequent mission, you go and do the ground attack. I would have felt that would have balanced a little bit better. But this really is me searching for something negative to say, just so you don't accuse me of being completely biased when it comes to this. But honestly, I do just love this campaign. Absolutely brilliant. 10 out of 10. The best campaign. I think I'm really happy saying that. The best DCS campaign that I've ever played. Really looking forward to doing some more campaigns, some ground pounder sim. I've heard some great things, and I'd definitely like to jump in there. The time this video goes out, polls should be closing on my vote for the next campaign, so hopefully I will catch you next week with something brand new, and we can have a look at that together. Until then, remember to be kind to yourselves and everyone else. Cheers.